So that video is from a little while ago, for the observant of you. From that, you start to get a bit of a flavor of what we do at Sparklabs. For us, it's really about building ecosystems around core industry areas. And that's what we've been doing with Cultiv8. We've helped to rally a group of teams from across the world who are using our support to help reach further and drive their aspirations harder. We group together networks of powerful and intelligent mentors to be able to help them enter new markets, to be able to help them grow their businesses, and to be able to help them think creatively about how they drive the transformation of their industries. Part of our ecosystem here in Orange and in Australia is supported by the DPI. Without them, we wouldn't be able to get these guys the kinds of research opportunities that they need to help drive the growth of their business. And it's my pleasure to introduce Michael Bullen, Deputy Director of the DPI and Head of the GATE Initiative, to give you a little bit more information on exactly how they are also supporting startups.
Thanks very much, Guy. It's a great pleasure to be here today. And we launched September last year. So from September last year to September this year, here's where we are. Morning session this morning showcasing the DPI incubation cohort, Sparklabs Cultiv8 this afternoon with the acceleration cohort. As Guy said, my name's Michael Bullen. I'm Deputy Director General for the New South Wales DPI. And what's DPI? DPI is one of the largest agricultural R&D organisations within Australia. We've been in existence for over 100 years, and many of the transformational things that have occurred in agriculture across Australia and New South Wales, we've been behind. I can name the introduction of canola in the 60s, genetic and genomic improvement in the cattle and sheep industry over the last number of years. So in some ways, we've been innovating for that whole 100 years. As we're all aware, one of the challenges we have in Australia is how do we commercialise our R&D? How do we take that globally? So when the opportunity came for me to focus on not my previous job, which was heading up agriculture in DPI, but what's the future look like for a 100-year-old research organisation, one of those opportunities was around what could we do around commercialisation, incubation and acceleration. We were fortunate to be able to have those conversations with Sparklabs and the opportunity to form the partnership at Orange through the GATE. But I'd add, we also have long-term partnerships with Charles Sturt University at Wagga, the University of New England at Armidale, and linkages across regional New South Wales to provide that opportunity for businesses and people to come together. And if I just go back to before afternoon tea, where Guy Webb, well, I was going to juggle when I came out, but that would have been an absolute disaster. But one of the opportunities that has presented, and this is what I see as the value that this partnership brings, is Guy came through the Sparklabs connection. They were looking to grow, but however, they needed to do some R&D to showcase what's happened, to translate from the laboratory to the field and how it might be adopted across Australia and more broadly. That's where we come in, is forming those research partnerships to underpin the opportunities that present. And so, to finish, what I'd like to summarise, if you like, is the three things that I think make the ecosystem what it is. The first one is that linkage to R&D to be able to prove up the ideas and the concepts that come. The second is the incubation process and program that we run. And the third thing is the acceleration. So if you like, we have a supportive program that takes it from idea all the way through to hopefully significant global and Australian businesses. And when we started the conversation and we first came up with the idea of the agtech ecosystem, it felt a little presumptuous when we put the G in front of it to be the global bit. But I think what that really signals is that if we're going to make a true difference to Australian agriculture, we can't think myopically about what happens in New South Wales or Australia. We need to think globally. And that's why the partnerships that we have with Sparklabs, the Bridge Hub down in Orange and other opportunities that present across Australia are absolutely fundamental to us achieving what we want to achieve for Australian agriculture. It is an absolutely an absolute privilege to have been engaged with Sparklabs over the last 12 to 18 months to get to where we are. I thank Jimmy, Frank, and the other founding partners of Sparklabs, Jonathan, Mal, Guy, Kate, and all your team at Sparklabs Cultiv8. We wouldn't be here today without your support and the partnership that we've got. And finally, I can't leave the stage without thanking the team inside DPI, Carolyn, James, who was there this morning, Janine, Krista, Debbie, and all the other people from DPI who have given life to this, this partnership and relationship. So hope you enjoy the rest of the afternoon, and thank you very much.
As you know, we've every demo day, this demo day here in Korea will be December 12th. And you guys are all invited to come to our demo day. And what we do, demo days evolve. We used to just showcase Korean companies or the companies in our cohort. But pretty soon, we started showcasing companies from our other funds and our other accelerators. And this demo day, they don't know yet, one company, we'll start that tradition with Cultiv8 also. That this demo day, we're going to ask a company to present on our demo day. But the other thing that we're trying to do is the next company is from the Sparklabs Beijing class. And Sparklabs Beijing is another accelerator which we partnered up with CITIC, which is one of the largest asset management companies in China. And when I just arrived here, the air was so clean. So maybe this problem that they're trying to solve is not an Australian problem because the air is so clean here. But the following problem right now is a problem that is very, very dear to Chinese, Koreans, and even Singaporeans. So many people ask, I know a lot of fund managers are, and they ask you, so is your fund a blind fund? And you said, structurally, yes, we're blind because we don't know. We don't know what we're going to invest in. But I tell you this, I say, we may be blind in structure, but we will provide you insight to what are the smartest entrepreneurs thinking and solving right now. So meet Wind with one of the smartest companies I know that I'm very proud about. Thank you.
My name is Ray, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Wind. At Wind, we started this company for a little girl named Sophia. She's the daughter of my co-founder, and when she was born, she was very sensitive to the environment. In fact, when she went to China, she suffered from air pollution, which is one of the world's greatest health hazards today. Air pollution kills 7 million people every year, increases the probability of stroke by over 80%, and can even cut crop yields by half. All in all, air pollution affects 1.6 billion people around the world. And we want to do something about that. At Wind, we're creating a platform to improve air quality. It starts with solutions that can clean the air, make things better. But it's more than that. It also includes sensors that can make what's invisible visible. And also, if we can get many of these sensors together, a piece of data that can help whole communities. We started with our first product on Kickstarter. It's this guy. It's a smart and portable air purifier. And together, we raised about $600,000 on Kickstarter in less than a month, making it the highest grossing air quality project ever. We were covered by the press, and were even voted by Time magazine as one of the best inventions of that year. Today, this product is being sold in over 80 countries around the world. But it's much more than an air purifier. We invented this guy. We call it the air quality tracker. It's a sensor that measures air pollution. Today, if you wanted to buy a really accurate sensor, you can buy one of these TSI machines. They cost $7,000, and they're the size of a shoebox. That's not very practical for mass adoption. This sensor is 1/200th the size and 1/100th the cost. But it's also very accurate. In fact, compared to that same TSI, our correlation is about 0.995, almost 1, across a very broad range of pollutant levels. And what that's enabled us to do is get into B2B. These sensors are now being embedded into things in consumer applications, such as air conditioners that are being sold in the tens of millions, potentially, automotive applications, smart buildings, industrial, and even city applications. I'm very happy to announce that earlier this year, we signed one of the largest contracts in environmental sensors. One of the world's largest consumer health companies is looking to buy 5 million of these. And it's more than just the revenue from sensors, because what we also want to obtain is the data that these sensors can accomplish and can help us find. Because we're much more than a hardware company. In fact, the first product that we ever launched was an app called Air Bubbles. It's one of the top 3 downloaded air quality apps in the world, and it maps air quality from over 50 countries around globally. But there's a problem with that, and also all of their air quality apps today. It's that they come from only government sources. If you count every single air quality station in the entire world today, there's about 10,000. In some countries like India, there's only 60 for the entire nation. And the other problem is that these sensors are only outdoors. Our vision is that with cheap but accurate sensors, we can get to many more orders of magnitude of sensors and map not only outdoors, but also indoors, where most people spend their time. And just to illustrate the power of this data, I wanted to show you a case study. So in Las Vegas, there's a conference every year called the Consumer Electronics Show. We had 10 of our customers use our sensors. They kept it on the entire day. And in 2 days, they collected 12,000 data points all around the city, because they walk around for the conference. And what you can see here is the raw data from 2 hotels, one showing very good air quality data, or very bad air quality data, and the other one showing very positive air quality data. So the first time, we can use crowdsourcing to map the world and see which places are good and healthy and which places need improvement. Today, we have 20,000 sensors around the world, and that's growing very fast. And we're collecting every single day about 300,000 data points. And we're turning those into insights, actionable insights, such as comparisons, such as forecasts and heat maps. An example of how this data can then be used is with Ctrip. They're the largest travel company in the world. They're in China. And we're hoping that when we work together with them, we can map all the hotels in China. And they said that if we can get that information, we can together help change how people select which places to go to and how they travel. This data can be used for consumers, for businesses, and also for governments with city planning. And our business model is simple. We start selling hardware or services to those customers. They generate data, which then goes back to drive recommendations of the same such hardware and services that are needed for improvement. In 2017, Wind generated $2 million in revenue, of which 40% was with our B2B partners, and that's growing. That share is growing. And we aim to go over $100 million in revenue over the next few years. Our team mostly came out of MIT and Stanford. My background is in electrical engineering and computer science. I also worked in technology and also in private equity at a company called Silver Lake for 6 years. And we received funding from venture capital and angels around the world. We're very happy to be here in Sydney today. It's my first time in Sydney. And we're very happy to be part of Sparklabs Beijing and the entire Sparklabs community. Just in conclusion, we started this company for a little girl named Sophia. But we hope that through our air quality intelligence platform, that we can help everyone around the world breathe a little bit better. Thank you very much.
From Meat and Livestock Australia. As the red meat RDC, we continually scour the world for technologies that will create new competitive advantages for our industry participants. One of those, unsurprisingly, is the blockchain technology. Our particular interests extend beyond the basic, well not basic, but the traceability components and reach into the areas of what can it achieve around inventory management, supply chain optimization, and further new capital models that can contribute new capital to our industry. And to that point, it's my pleasure to introduce the founder and CEO of Bio.io, Raja.
Afternoon, everybody. Thank you for sharing some time to hear all these wonderful stories you've heard today. I'm here to talk about the food supply chain and a whole series of problems that are complex and need fixing right away. I'd venture to say that really very few of us really know who makes our food. Shall I? You to speak probably. Hello? So anyway, going back to this, we have no idea who makes the food. How's it get to us? And then it seems like you need a chemistry degree today to actually understand what's in it. At our company, Ripe.io, we've been using advances in blockchain technology, IoT, sensors, and advanced learning so that we can create a shared, trusted record about our food so that we have an idea of what we're actually eating, where does it come from, is it safe? Now, the UN tells us that we need to feed 9 billion people somewhere between 2030 and 2050. The unfortunate consequence of this is that it's putting an enormous strain on the supply chain. And so we see really poor outcomes in things like food wastage, food fraud, and certainly we've heard all about recalls. And unfortunately, what's happening is this is causing us as consumers to demand a whole lot more about what we're eating, or like to understand what it is in our food. And unfortunately, it's causing a diminishment in trust. I mean, in the US, the Nielsen did a study where less than 25% of Americans actually trust their brands, their retailers, and food. My guess is if we're asked that in China, we're looking at maybe 1%. Definitely not a good spot. So, the food system, we evaluated it. It is really an amazing matrix of farmers, of producers, of manufacturers, of distributors, all the way up to the retailer, and ultimately you get your food. Problem is that it's fairly disconnected, leaving a very inefficient, costly system that really doesn't have a lot of trust. We have to solve for that. Enter the blockchain. Right now, because of the decentralized nature of food, the blockchain is actually a good technology to be able to go ahead and create collaboration through a rational set of shared data. And you've probably heard about things like ledgers and tokens and so on, but the idea is so that you have a shared single view that's been validated by the supply chain. So, our blockchain of food is totally focused on food quality. Unlike a number of blockchains that are emerging in the space that focus on traceability, we think if we tell you more about this, the food, the process, and the people that are involved, it's a lot more important than punching a button saying that's where it came from. So, what we've done is we take in all of this information that comes from the field, the farmers, and we create what we call a digital twin of the food. And that allows us to actually end up creating a new type of network that we call the food quality network. And what that means for us is that we see ourselves one day, and shortly, being able to go ahead and license our software, which we do with our current client base, work on APIs, and create a real new model of being able to collectively provide curated data that can be shared with institutions within the system. Now, for you financial types in the audience, you've actually come up to us and said, oh, wait a minute, you want to be the Bloomberg of food. Well, I look at their valuation, I go, damn right, why not? So, in that sense, we aim to be that one day. Let me show you a couple of our products that we've released to the market. Number one is our food browser. The idea behind this is that we provide our supply chain customers the ability to see their food and the process before it gets to them, before it gets to you. So the reality is that we can show some information about the produce types, we can show something about the farm, and then we can also show information about tracking that food with sensor information that'll tell us a little bit about the temperature conditions of, say, a tomato. We also work with our customers to showcase where their salad come from. And ultimately, the food bundle is meant to enable a wide distribution about the quality of that food. I want to talk to you maybe just briefly about our company, who we are. We're operating in Silicon Valley and New York, and my co-founder and I actually come from the financial trading business. Myself from the banking side, Phil Harris, my happiest side of the equation, from the exchanges. And so we both found blockchain. I ended up working as one of the earliest employees of a consortium called R3 around banking and insurance. And Phil actually sat on the deal team at NASDAQ that oversaw investments in Chain.com, which recently got sold. This experience allowed us to actually create this wonderful team of blockchain technologists, of food and ag tech specialists, and really experts in supply chain and operations. We even have agronomists and flavor specialists on our team. We're really excited about this group. And we also have a whole series of customers that represent a big chunk of American produce. Dairy Farmers of America have 35% of all dairy sold in the US. The National Pork Board controls and manages all of the pork sold there. And so we have an ability to deploy that blockchain so that we can actually federate the data, so that we can actually get to a real shared record of that truth. We've been lucky enough, and in fact, I just found out about a half an hour ago, we just signed our first large consumer products good companies. So I'm a cheap date, so a beer might actually let me reveal who that might be. We'll see outside. And ultimately, I wanted to mention that we've had actually just such an excellent experience with the accelerators, but certainly Sparklabs Cultiv8's our best. JJ, you don't have to pay me for that later. All right, and then lastly, we've actually just closed our seed round funding with Maersk Growth Ventures and also an innovation lab in Chicago called RelishWorks. So this is allowing us to take that capital, build out our team, finish the product, and then ultimately serve our customers. And so at Ripe, we aim to be providing transparency in every bite of food that we eat. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Charles Kay, and I've spent my working life farming. My business runs and owns farms in southwest Victoria, the Southern Riverina, northeast Victoria, and on the Monero. In conjunction with this, I spent just shy of a decade in corporate agriculture. To be fair to say, I'm an ag enthusiast. A little tedious if you have to sit next to me at a dinner party, but okay for an afternoon like this. Now, one of the big issues our industry has is a lack of liquidity. How often do we hear the phrase asset-rich, cash-poor applied to our industry? Less than 2% of the assets under management by farmers are cash or cash equivalents. Conversely, how frustrating for those people that want to invest in farming but don't have a lazy several million lying around to spend. It is therefore with great excitement that I'm able to introduce to you this afternoon a lady whose business will revolutionise the way in which farmland is traded into the future. This will then solve this liquidity issue. Ladies and gentlemen, would you give a warm welcome to Lisa McFadgen.
Thanks, Charlie. Hello, my name is Lisa McFadgen, CEO and co-founder of Secure Impact. We are a rural property and agri-asset marketplace. This all began with our family farm. We're fourth-generation farmers and have been on the same piece of land for the last 110 years. Our farm is not too different to the 96% of family farms in Australia. We have a high asset value, but the problem is my dad's getting older. He's 70, and the physical and demanding tasks of farming are starting to take its toll. My sisters and I can't afford to buy the property, so my dad's options are limited. In selling the farm, we lose part of our family history, but also decades of stewardship of producing crops and raising livestock. We live, understand and work with farming and technology. Our team has a very diverse range of experience. Myself, 20 years working in the agricultural industry. A property valuer specialising in rural, water, commercial industrial property. My co-founder, Rowan Cook, is a tech executive, venture partner and a foodie, and he has business interests in Sydney and Orange. So through my work as a property valuer, I continually saw the barriers of farmland transition, particularly with family farms. 50% of farms will sell in the next 10 years. 60% of farmers have no known successor, putting pressure on the farm entry and exit. The value of farmland transacted in 2017 was $8.7 billion. We still have a liquidity problem in agriculture. No solution. Still limited to no alternative capital sources. Our goal at Secure Impact is to create a liquidity platform for farmers. Our concept is so simple. If you've ever looked at a block of residential units, there may be 20 in the block, all on a single parcel of land. Units 5, 10, 12 and 14 can be sold to different owners, each having their own separate legal entity. Why can this not happen with farms? At Secure Impact, we have created a new digital title ownership where we secure the value of an asset and fractionalise it, making it a freely tradable, traceable and monetised asset class. The Secure Impact platform has two core functions. The Secure Impact Marketplace is a listing platform for farmers and agents. Our long-term view and strategy is to focus on the lifetime value of a farmer through the lease, share farm and the sale of a property. The SecureX exchange allows a farmer to wholly sell a farm, buy a fraction of a farm, or sell a fraction of a farm in real time on a buy-sell platform. Our SecureX exchange uses an agricultural index. This index is a snapshot of the risk and reward of the listed properties, the ability to compare apples and pears. This index includes risk, capital and production, and sustainability, taking into account land capability, soil type, rainfall, infrastructure, and location. The Secure Impact Marketplace launched 2 weeks ago. Our revenue model is based on transactions and also value-added services. To capture, by 2020, 1% of the land values transacted in Australia is a $94 million market. Through the Secure Impact platform, we are providing liquidity for farmers. This is an opportunity for our own family farm, where we may have a vested interest in the ownership, something that could be passed on to beneficiaries, and something for the next 110 years. My name is Lisa McFadgen, CEO and co-founder of Secure Impact.
The phrase world-changing is often bandied around in startups. This next company truly embodies that sentiment. In its potential to transform the market for land regeneration, in its potential to transform the planet we live on, and in its potential to create enormous financial returns. It's my great pleasure to introduce Susan Graham, CEO and co-founder of Biocarbon Engineering.
There are 3 people who've had a critical role in shaping the history of climate to date. Charles David Keeling. Now, Keeling was the first person to measure carbon in the atmosphere. It's because of Keeling that we have those characteristic sawtooth graphs of carbon going up and up and up. James Shand. Now, this man invented the chainsaw. It was revolutionary for the construction industry, but also enabling for the removal of the world's forests at an industrial scale. This is the moment that we became more effective at chopping down trees than replanting them. And Wangari Maathai, here is someone who has achieved a superhuman effort. Maathai started a movement that planted 50 million trees. Now, Keeling showed us the problem, and Shand unwittingly enabled us to make that problem worse at a faster rate. And Maathai, while being heroic, showed us our frightening inability to deal with the scale of the problem. Now, the essence of the problem is that we have a net loss of 6 billion trees each year, and that is despite the world spending billions of dollars planting billions of trees. We are still going backwards by 6 billion a year. How are we going to reach the UN target of planting 300 billion trees by 2030? Our current methods are just not enough. They are slow, dangerous, and they're not able to operate at scale. And remember, to plant a tree, it's not just that moment of planting a tree. There's planning, coordination of contractors, land preparation, monitoring, and maintenance. It's a complex process. We need a solution that is fast, simple, and able to operate at scale. Our solution is to plant trees using drones. A team of 2 operators controls a swarm of drones, all automated, each planting 25,000 pods a day. We are planting 150 times faster and 10 times cheaper than traditional hand planting methods. Now, we started with a vision of hardware enabling global scale restoration, planting billions of trees a year. But what we found is that we also capture a huge amount of highly detailed landscape data on everything from soil and species to carbon sequestration and survival rates. Now, to harness the power of this data, we developed Sky. It's an AI platform for environmental management. Now, Sky is helping our customers with stakeholder engagement and to make better decisions. So what we have is Sky providing actionable data and our hardware providing the means to action it in an intelligent and landscape-specific way. And this has big benefits for our mining and oil and gas customers. So mines have a regulatory requirement to restore the land and replant trees on tens of thousands of hectares each year. And the oil and gas industry needs to offset their carbon emissions. To give you a sense of scale, the oil and gas industry emitted over 10 billion tonnes of carbon dioxide last year. And the current price of carbon is over $15 a tonne. We are going after a multi-billion-dollar market. Now, in each of these cases, the restoration work is happening in places where people find it hard. We operate in challenging and remote environments, in everywhere from mangroves in Myanmar to mine site rehab just up the road in the Hunter. Now, we started commercial operations right here in Australia at Yancoal's Moolarben mine in Mudgee in 2017. Since then, we've been expanding our offerings and capabilities to mines across the Hunter and to a large-scale carbon sequestration project in Myanmar. We've also signed a long-term national partnership with Greening Australia. Now, do we have traction? We've completed 10 operations to date, and we're going from 1 to 5 mines this season, as well as our large-scale carbon project in Myanmar. We have MOUs signed for $30 million, and our projections of revenue are $25 million by 2020 and $100 million by 2022. Now, we can only achieve all of this with our great network of partners across the world, across tech, finance, and restoration. We've also pulled together a stellar team with skills and experience across plant science, robotics, machine learning, and military logistics. To this, we've added some great advisors and mentors with a founding team member from Google X and a member of the President's Circle of the National Academy of Sciences. So now that we live in a world where drones plant trees, we've leveled the playing fields. We're no longer fighting unfair odds against the chainsaw. And if we plant 500 billion trees, we will offset all of human carbon emissions. We will literally change the trajectory of climate on Earth. My name is Susan Graham, and we are Biocarbon Engineering. And we invite you all to join us as we change the world, 1 billion trees at a time.
Had a cool presentation. So, to all the teams at both the Gate and Sparklabs today that are presented, well done. You've done a phenomenal job, and we look forward to hearing from many of the companies later on, because we will continue the journey with them at Sparklabs Cultiv8. So my name's Mal Nutt. I'm a partner at Sparklabs Cultiv8, and I have the pleasure of introducing our final speaker this afternoon. So who in the room hasn't heard of Netflix? Okay, my mother and some of the farmers that don't have coverage in the room, but all of us really know about Netflix. Our guest speaker today is Mark Randolph. Mark's a veteran Silicon Valley entrepreneur, and in 1996, he founded Netflix. He was a founding CEO, and he spent 8 years at the company transitioning the business from a DVD mail-out company into a global enterprise with millions of delighted subscribers. Even though Mark's famous for founding Netflix, he's a veteran in Silicon Valley with over 4 decades of entrepreneurial experience. He's been a founder of over half a dozen other successful startups. He's been a mentor to scores of early-stage entrepreneurs, and he's invested in numerous successful startup businesses and even more unsuccessful ones. JJ and I, JJ's had a big rap today, he's heard from lots of people, hasn't he? JJ and I first met Mark over a bottle of soju at a Korean barbecue restaurant 4 years ago at Sparklabs Demo Day. Since then, he's been a mate, an advisor to us, a mentor to the teams, and he's flown in today to present to us. So he's going to be presenting on risk-taking and innovation. Please welcome Mark Randolph.
Thank you for the great intro, and thanks for the warm welcome. I could use it right about now. I'm kind of feeling a little small. We've all kind of heard these amazing pitches about people who are bringing us clean water and clean air and a healthy food supply, and I kind of recognize that my biggest contribution is Netflix and chill. So, it's also interesting because the Cultiv8 class has come from all over the world. So I thought it appropriate that I start today by talking about an equally remote part of the world, populated by interesting people with a strange dialect. And I'm talking, of course, about Dallas, Texas. I'm talking about this building in particular, which, believe it or not, is one of my favorite buildings in the world. It's the Renaissance Tower. It's not the biggest building in Dallas, and you can tell it's certainly not the most architecturally interesting. The reason that I'm so fond of this building is because for many years, this was the headquarters of the Blockbuster Corporation. And a meeting actually took place here in the year 2000, which has figured very prominently both in my life as an entrepreneur, but also in the trajectory of this little company that I was running called Netflix. Now, in 2000, Netflix was a very different company than the one you know now. We were young. We were about 2.5 years old. We were small. We had about 100 employees. And that year, we were on track to do maybe $3 million. Unfortunately, we were also on track to have spent about $50 million. Yeah, the VCs in the audience immediately picked up on that one. Not a very sustainable thing. And so we did what prudent entrepreneurs do, is we decided to pursue strategic alternatives, which is code for we got to sell this sucker, and quick. Now, the obvious strategic alternative for us was Blockbuster. But in the year 2000, Blockbuster was in a very different place than we were. We had 100 employees. They had 60,000 employees. They had 9,000 stores. We were on track to do $3 million. They were on track to do $6 billion. And so when we called them trying to get a meeting, trying to get some contact with them, nothing. Not a peep. And so we went about our business until about 2 months later, and we happened to be on a corporate retreat, and we were up in the mountains outside of a city called Santa Barbara at a dude ranch, with horses and the whole thing. And you know that in Silicon Valley, we're pretty casual, and when you go on retreat, even more so. And I remember all I had with me was shorts and sandals and some T-shirts. And that is when Blockbuster called and said, "We'd love to see you tomorrow morning in Dallas." And we said, how are we ever going to get from this little ranch up in the foothills all the way to Dallas by tomorrow morning for a meeting? And so we did the thing that every company should do when they're $50 million in the hole. We leased a corporate jet. 10,000 here, 10,000 there. It's a rounding error. And we fly to Dallas, and we get in the cab and go to this building, go up to the 26th or 27th story, and into a conference room that I swear was as big as this one. And don't forget, I'm in shorts and sandals and a T-shirt. And I remember I was kind of jealous because my business partner, Reed Hastings, was there, and he had on a Hawaiian shirt. I mean, he had buttons. Anyway, in come the Blockbuster guys, and we make our pitch that we will run the online business, they'll run the stores, we'll find all those amazing synergies everyone's always talking about, and everybody wins. And they nodded their heads in the right places and asked some questions. Then they asked the big question, how much should they pay for us? And I remember Reed getting his courage up and saying, $50 million? And that's exactly what they did. Nothing. Just dumbfounded silence at the hubris that we'd asked for $50 million. And as you can imagine, the meeting went downhill pretty quickly after that. And it was a long, quiet ride back to the airport and on the plane back to Santa Barbara. And I'm not kidding, I remember sitting on the plane with my head down, just thinking, oh, now we're going to have to kick their ass. And we did. Took us about 10 years, but eventually we did overtake Blockbuster and then eventually drove them out of business. Now, thank you for that. But I tell that story actually for a little bit more of a reason than self-satisfaction. I tell it because it's kind of a really inspiring story, especially for the entrepreneurs in the audience. It's inspiring because a handful of people with no experience in the video industry managed to take down a $6 billion company with 60,000 employees. And we did it in 10 years. But if you're one of those $6 billion companies, and I know there's some people in the audience, then it's a different story. Because then it says, you never know who's coming after you. They're going to look nothing like you. They may not even mean business today. Because what it really says is that if you're going to avoid being disrupted yourself, you've got to learn how to be the one who does the disrupting and not let someone else come after you. Now, Netflix obviously was a disruptive story, but Netflix was actually just one of 7 startups that I've had a hand in starting. And since leaving Netflix more than a dozen years ago, I've had a chance to work with scores of other early-stage startups, with hundreds of early-stage entrepreneurs. And I've picked up a few simple patterns about what it is that lets these little companies take down the big ones. And I've also seen what lets the big companies successfully defend themselves against the little guys. And it's deceptively simple. You do not need to be in Silicon Valley. The fact that we're here today is proof of that. There's tremendous innovation taking place all over the world. The internet has totally leveled the playing field. You do not need to have special training. You don't need to have a computer science degree. You don't need to have a business degree. One of my favorite entrepreneurs drove a taxi in Los Angeles. He fought forest fires in Montana. He dropped out of college, and then he started his own company. Another one of my favorite entrepreneurs played in a ska band. He had dreadlocks down to his waist, and he began a music streaming service. Another one is just 17 years old. Really, anyone these days can be a disruptor. You don't even need to be particularly smart. I've found that some of the best innovators are not the A students or even the B, they're the C students. They're the people who have not had all that risk-taking squeezed out of them. But it's simple to say what you don't need. What do you need? And I think there's really just two things. Now, obviously, you need to have that tolerance for risk. We've all seen that. And obviously not scary, dangerous risk. It's that type of risk that comes from starting down a path and not knowing where it's going. The risk's as simple as ordering something on the menu that you don't know what it is. It's that embrace of uncertainty. But what I believe is even more important than tolerance for risk is a simple one. You have to be an unbelievable idea generator. The reality is, ideas don't count for anything anymore. They do not need to be big ideas, like Mark Zuckerberg just wanted to meet girls, and that turned into Facebook. They do not need, my son, don't want to forget him. My son started his first company when he was only 8 years old. When he realized the candy bar he could buy for 10 cents at the grocery store could be sold the next day at school for $1. Candy arbitrage. It does not need to be an original idea. People have been selling books since they invented the printing press. But think of the unbelievable innovations that have come from this simple bookseller. They don't need to be complex ideas. The Post-it note is just a piece of paper, and that little piece of paper sells about $1 billion a year. And I'm going to go out on a limb. It doesn't even need to be a good idea. Because what's a good idea? Now, when I told my wife the idea for what eventually became Netflix, she thought it was the stupidest thing she'd ever heard. And we've all had that happen to us, right? Where you wake up in the morning with this great idea and you come racing down into the kitchen and you tell your spouse, or you come into the office and you tell your coworkers, you tell your boss, or you tell your employees, and then what do they say? That'll never work. And then they're very helpful and they tell you all the reasons it's so stupid. Now, why is it that no one can tell a good idea from a bad idea? Well, to help you understand that, I want to introduce you to somebody. It's a gentleman named William Goldman. Now, I'm going to guess that no one here has any idea who William Goldman is, and I'm not surprised. He's a Hollywood guy. He's a Hollywood writer. And if you don't know his name, maybe you've seen some of his work. He wrote a movie called Princess Bride. Maybe some of the younger people have seen that. People of my generation know him for writing a movie called Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He's written probably 20 movies in all. He's won 2 Academy Awards for screenwriting. But ironically, William Goldman is famous for writing 3 words. What William Goldman wrote was this: nobody knows anything. Nobody knows anything. Now, he was talking about Hollywood, and in particular, how no one has any idea how well a movie's going to do until after it's already done it. That you can have the top director, you can have A-list stars, you can have an incredible script and end up with a complete flop. Or you can have a first-time director, you can have amateur actors, and you can have no script at all and end up with a movie like Blair Witch Project, which cost $35,000 to make and grossed $250 million. How could that be? It's because nobody knows anything. And it's true in Hollywood, and I believe it's true any place that people are coming up with new ideas. I mentioned before that I had had a hand in starting 7 different companies. Now, 2 of the names in this list have billion-dollar-plus market caps. 3 of them have IPO'd. 1 of them completely out of business. 2 of them mediocre success. But if you had asked anyone, including me, before they started which would be which, I guarantee that no one could have told you. Because truly, no one knows anything. And it's an important thing to realize. Because if no one knows anything, then it's pointless asking. All you have to do is say, since no one knows anything, I'm going to take that risk and do something. I'm going to make something, I'm going to test something, I'm going to build something, I'm going to try something. Most of us know that you're going to learn more in 1 day of trying it than in 6 months of thinking about it. And don't even waste your time thinking about business plans. You know the expression that no business plan ever survives a collision with a real customer? It's true. Don't bother writing it and thinking it, just start doing it, and that's where the learning takes place. But of course, it's got to begin with these ideas. And with you guys, I don't need to talk about where ideas come from because you're all experts at this. You know, some of you have done new technologies. My most recent startup was a big data startup. Current trends, climate change, healthcare, education, new business models like collaborative consumption. That was my previous company before Netflix. But this is all tech stuff. There's a much, much easier way to come up with ideas. And it's so simple that I believe anyone in the world can do it. And it's as simple as that. It's just looking for pain. It's teaching yourself that the world's an imperfect place. But I'm not saying that you say, what's wrong generally? I mean, look at things you know well. Your job, your hobbies, your business. And to give you an example of how easy I think it is to use pain to come up with ideas, I'm going to tell you about a job that I had. And I had this job a long time ago when I was in university. And I had a job as a house painter. Now, this was just about 40 years ago. And it was a very different world. So obviously, there was no DVDs, there was no streaming video, there was no Wi-Fi, no personal computers, you didn't wear a computer on your wrist, no self-driving cars, none of that stuff. And back then, when you had to buy paint, you'd go to the hardware store, and paint used to come in a container that looked like this one. I know, kind of antique looking, right? Now I'm going to flash forward 40 years to this last summer when I was painting my daughter's bedroom. Now, it's a different world. We have amazing technology advances. Now we have self-driving cars, now we have the internet, now we have browsers, we have them all in the same place. It's incredible. And so it was actually pretty interesting to me that this last summer, when I went to the hardware store to buy paint, it now comes in a container that looks like this one. Yes. No change. 40 years. Now, is this because that is the best possible paint delivery system we can think of? Well, I hope not. It is so deeply flawed. It's amazing it's still around. To start, you've got to open this can. Now, opening a can of paint, as you probably all know, requires a very specialized tool called a screwdriver. And can you think of any other consumer product that requires you to find a screwdriver to open it? It's okay. I do own a screwdriver. So now you pry off the lid, and you have a little lid with wet paint on it. You carefully put it in the corner so you won't step on it. And now the next step, you have to stir the paint. And they've developed a specialized tool for stirring paint. It's called a stick. You can see it up in the top here. And so I stir the paint, and it works pretty well for that. but now I've got a stick covered with paint, and I've got to figure out a way to scrape all the paint off the stick, and I put it carefully with the lid, try to avoid stepping on it. Now I've got to pour the paint into my tray, and you can see the can has an easy pour spout. But I pour it carefully and it works, and it goes into my little paint tray, but then I tilt the can back up, and two things happen. First, unless I'm really careful, paint spills down the side of the can, where of course it gets on the floor or my hands or my clothes. But worse, a little bit of paint fills in this little lip right here. More on that in a moment. Now, I will not belabor the painting process. You've got to put down drop cloths and put tape on your windows, and you've got to get a roller and try and figure out where you've painted before and a different color for the trim, and then you've got to clean it up and pull this like soggy roller off with your bare hands, and ugh. But it's okay. I finished. And now I have a little bit of extra paint in my tray, so I carefully put it back in the can. So far, so good. Now I'm going to finish the cleanup. I'm going to put the lid back on the can. And it's perfect, isn't it, that it requires a screwdriver to open a can, and it requires yet one more tool to close it, a hammer. Get the hammer, and I give it a few good whacks to seat the lid, and I'd forgotten about that paint. And of course, it sprays all over my legs and all over the walls. What a disaster. Now, as I told that story, maybe some of you felt sorry for me, but hopefully most of you, being an entrepreneurial audience, were thinking, that's crazy. Why don't they sell paint, I don't know, in the kind of container that milk comes in? Pour it and you reseal it. Or even better, at least in the United States, detergent has these fancy bottles with a fancy lip that the detergent goes right back down. Or even, why isn't there an aftermarket product, like a lid with a spout on it? Or why isn't there an embedded magnetic stirring? Or why don't they? Or why can't I? Or why isn't there? I mean, hopefully, as I was telling the story, you found all these ideas jumping into your head without even trying. And this was something that happened to me. Imagine what happens when you can get people to do it on the things that are happening to them. You see, ideas do not spring out of thin air in some mythical eureka moment. The idea for Netflix, for example, did not come from some moment of anguish over a late fee on a movie. We were looking for that idea for a long time, and it was buried in a big pile of bad ideas. And we didn't even find it in a video store. The idea for Netflix actually came to us while we were carpooling. Now, this story goes back 20-plus years ago when two friends and I had started a very small, geeky software company. And we were laboring in happy obscurity for about 6, 7 months. We were just in beta, and then a great thing happened. Our little company was acquired by a much bigger, even geekier software company. And it was a great thing. Our investors made money. All of a sudden, our stock options were worth something. And we all got jobs with this big software company. But there was two little bonuses. The first was that the CEO of that company was a gentleman named Reed Hastings. And I went to work for Reed. The second bonus is that Reed and I turned out to live in the same town. And we began carpooling to work. We did that for about 6 months, and then lightning struck again. An even bigger company bought our big software company. And once again, great outcome. Our investors made even more money. Stock options were worth even more. And best of all, I was fired. But I wasn't fired in that, that walk of shame where you're carrying the box with your office supplies out to your car. I was fired in that Silicon Valley golden handcuffs kind of way, where they bring you in and say, Mark, due to redundancies and overlaps, your services will not be blah, 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 blah. And I'm kind of tuning it out. And then I recognize it's not quite what I expected. And I said, so wait a minute. So I will need to keep coming to work for about 6 months. Yes. And you'll keep paying me, and my stock options will keep vesting. Correct. And I can have my office, and I'll have my fast internet connection and my whiteboard and all that whole thing. They go, yeah, nothing changes. And I go, but I don't need to really do anything? And they go, well, not really. And I said, well, sign me up for that job. I'm going to use that time to do my next company. Now, Reed Hastings was in the same boat. He was being made redundant, but he didn't want to start another company. He was going to become an educational philanthropist and change the world, which largely is done. But he wanted to have a hand in this startup game, so he came to an arrangement. He would be my angel investor. I would start up and run the company, and we would both get what we want. But first, we needed an idea, and here's how we did it. Every day, Reed would pick me up at my home in his car, and we would drive up and over the Santa Cruz Mountains to our office in Sunnyvale. It was a commute of about 45 minutes to an hour. And on the drive, we would brainstorm ideas. We'd brainstorm dozens of ideas. And I'd go into my office and I'd research them, figure it out, look into details. And some of the ideas were okay, some were good, some were terrible. And then at the end of the day, I get back in the car with Reed, and we drive back home, back to Santa Cruz, and I tell him everything I learned. And we did this for months. Hundreds, literally hundreds of ideas. And some of them we pursued for a few days. Some we dismissed immediately. And one of the ideas, actually, was trying to disrupt the video business. And our idea was, maybe we could do video rental by mail. I mean, Jeff Bezos was selling books over the internet. Why couldn't we do video rental? But it didn't take much time in my little office to realize how bad an idea that was. Because if you think back 20 years, video rental was on VHS cassettes. They were big, and they were heavy, and they were expensive, and it didn't take much research at all to realize, bad idea, on to the next one. Until, about 3 weeks later, coincidentally, we heard about this new technology called the DVD. Little disc, thin and light, with a movie on it. And we realized this might open up some things we could do. And so we turned the car around mid-commute and drove back down to Santa Cruz. We went to a used music store and bought a used music CD. Then went 2 doors down to a stationery and bought a little envelope, a little pink gift envelope, the type you would put a greeting card in, put the CD in the envelope, addressed it to Reed's house in Santa Cruz, put a stamp on it, and dropped it in the slot, and went to work. And the very next morning, when Reed came to pick me up, he didn't even need to say anything. He just held up this little pink envelope with an unbroken CD in it that had gotten to his house in less than 24 hours for the price of a first-class stamp. And that's when we said, this changes things. This might open up some possibilities. And then my days changed. Because then I wasn't trying to find an idea, I was trying to validate one. And I did everything I could to see if I could figure out if this idea of renting DVDs by mail was going to work. How many DVD players were supposed to be sold? How many DVDs were out there? What did they cost? What about shipping? How about building a website? How many people? How much time? How much money? But I couldn't answer that one question that I needed to know, which is anyone going to do this? I mean, there was no DVD rental by mail companies I could look at. And I had to do that thing that every entrepreneur has to do. They have to make a decision and base the decision on incomplete and inconclusive and even worse, contradictory information. And obviously, you know what happened is that we decided to go for it. Reed wrote us a check for $2 million. I got a small office in a little town called Scotts Valley, California. We hired a dozen people, and we spent 6 months doing nothing more than building a simple e-commerce website, the type that most of you could probably build in a couple of hours. But nevertheless, 6 months later, on April 14th, 1998, 20 years ago, we launched a little company called Netflix. Now, The Netflix back then is not the Netflix you know now, especially not the one you know here in Australia. For one, DVD only. No streaming video. If you wanted a movie, fantastic. We're going to mail it to you. It's going to come in a little red envelope, and there's the DVD in a fancy sleeve. That was it. There wasn't a lot of innovation here. There was due dates. There was late fees. And we didn't just rent movies, we also sold them. In fact, we sold a lot of movies. We sold so many movies that at the end of our first summer in business, there was good news and there was bad news. And the good news is we were about to have our first $100,000 month, $1 million plus run rate. The bad news was it was almost all selling DVDs. And that was bad news because selling DVDs was a commodity business. Just a matter of time before Amazon's selling DVDs, and then the corner drugstore is selling DVDs, and the supermarket is selling DVDs, and the margins go to nothing, and you're out of business. Now, rental was pretty promising. High margins, operationally complex, so defensible. But the problem is, the customers, they hated it. They wouldn't do it. And if we could convince someone to do it once, he wouldn't do it again. Worse, doing both at the same time was really hard. Some of the movies you could rent and sell. Some you could only rent. Some you could only sell. Imagine trying to design a checkout process. We are also renting and selling. The shipping was complicated. The back-end processing, the economics. And we decided if we're going to make anything work, we've got to pick one and focus on it. But what do you pick? Do you focus on selling, which was 99% of our revenue, but then eventually it would go out of business? Or do you focus on rental, which if we could get it right, could potentially be a big business? I mean, easily $10 million. But at that point, didn't look promising at all. And that, quite frankly, was one of the hardest decisions I ever had to make. But we eventually decided to do it. And one day, we turned it off, walked away entirely from selling DVDs, and bet the whole future of the company on figuring out this stupid rental thing. And I've got to state the obvious, which is that when in one day you walk away from 99% of your revenue, it has a way of focusing your mind on the problem. And from that point forward, we were totally obsessed with figuring this thing out. And we had no shortage of ideas of things to try. And at first, I was a perfectionist. And so we'd pick something to test. And we would design this beautiful test. We'd commission custom photography. We would lovingly argue about every single word of copy. We would stress test the site. We'd check every link. And it would take a month. And we'd launch the test. And it would fail. We'd say, crap, we just wasted a month. Maybe we should go a little faster. So we'd do a test in 2 weeks, and it would fail. So we'd say faster, we'd do it in a week. Faster, we'd do it in 2 days. Pretty soon we were doing a new test every day. Pretty soon we could do 3 tests in a single day. And as you probably can imagine, when you're going that fast, things were getting really sloppy. I mean, sometimes the images would be the wrong image. Or we'd leave the watermark on from something we'd put up just as a stock photo. We had misspellings, we had typos, we had dead links. We would crash the site. And what we learned is it didn't matter. It didn't matter because if you had a bad idea, that even spending a month of doing this beautiful test didn't make it a good idea. But if you stumbled on something that actually would work, it didn't make a difference how poorly implemented the test was. Customers would fight to do it. They'd reboot the site. They'd struggle around the dead links. They'd figure out ways to call us or write us. And it was like shining this big spotlight on here's the thing you have to fix. It was this amazing insight that it wasn't about good ideas, that good ideas don't count for anything. It was all about building a process and a culture to allow us to try lots of bad ideas. And if I have to take credit for something, It's that we got really good at trying lots of bad ideas. We got so that we could turn on a dime. Have an idea? Let's try it. One after another. And eventually, some of them, we learned something, and then learned something else. And little by little, leapfrogged our way. But still, we got to this point that everyone gets to where you're getting desperate. You're running out of time, and worse, you're running out of money. And we had 3 ideas left that were our big ideas. And the first one was, we had a warehouse full of DVDs, hundreds of thousands of them. We said, why are we storing our DVDs here? They're not doing anything. Is there a way we could store them at our customers' houses? Let them just keep the DVDs. And when they want another one, they mail it back and we'll replace it. There's no due dates. There's no late fees. But what happened was when they mail them back, they'd have to come to the site and pick the next one. And no one wanted to do that. So he said another idea. Let's have them make a list of all the movies they want to see. And when one movie comes back in, we know immediately and automatically what to send them next. We called that the queue. And we said, why are we charging them $4 each time? Let's make it a subscription business. One monthly fee that automatically renews. And amazingly enough, when we combined those 3 things, it worked. Individually, nope. But that magic combination instantly changed the business. People began renting from us. They began telling their friends. When we got to the end of that first month, they didn't cancel. They kept on going. It immediately took off. And that marked the point, almost 2.5 years in, where we stopped being a startup and became a real company. But again, remember, no one knows anything. And if you had asked me on April 14th, 1998, on that launch day, what would the model look like eventually that would make Netflix successful? I never could have told you, because no one knows anything. In fact, if you had let me cheat and said, here's 3 possibilities, here's 3 others, here's 3 others, I never would have picked that. Never. And in fact, on April 14th, 1998, this was the last thing from my mind. I was totally focused on something entirely different, which was, is this silly thing going to work? We'd been working for 6 months, just building a website. And back then, you couldn't go on Amazon and just spin up an instance. You had to buy a server. You had to wire it up. You had to preload it. You had to build your own security stuff. You had to build your own redundancy. Everything was from scratch. And so it was pretty shaky. And I remember we had a conference room, and at one end was a table with a computer on it, and we rigged it up so that a bell would ring when an order came in. And at this end of the room, we had another table with champagne bottles and champagne glasses, because we were going to toast our hard work and success. And at 9 a.m. on the 14th, our CTO leaned over and hit a few keys, and we were live. And we all stood around, kind of expectantly waiting for something to happen. And then, ding, our first order. And we cheered and we clapped each other on the back. And as we were opening up the champagne, ding, ding, 2 more orders, 3. And we were all so excited. And then, ding, 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 7 orders. We couldn't believe it. And we were toasting and being so happy. And then we began to recognize it's been a while since the bells rung. And we waited, and it was still quiet. And is it plugged in? And we had crashed our servers. First 10 minutes. So when I look back on where I was thinking on April 14th, 1998, it wasn't, oh my gosh, how exciting. What I was doing was pushing a shopping cart up and down the aisles of an electronics superstore while the CTO was throwing all the components in we would use to limp the servers along that first day. But limp them we did, and we ended day 1 with about 100 orders. 100 orders. It blew me away. I never imagined we'd have 100 orders, especially in a single day. That was the whole first month forecast. But then, once we discovered the no due dates, no late fees thing, we had 130,000 subscribers. That totally blew me away. I could never imagine we'd ever have that many people who were actually Netflix customers. But now Now we have 130 million subscribers. We are all over the world. We make our own movies, we make our own television shows. It completely blows my mind. I never in a million years expected that Netflix, this stupid little idea about mailing DVDs, could ever turn into what it did. And you know, people stop me and go, gosh, Mark, congratulations on Netflix. You've got to be so proud of what's happened with Netflix. And I'm proud, but I'm never quite sure what I should be proud of. I mean, is it that I was smart? Well, no. As I hope I've explained, most of my ideas were bad ones. Probably 100-to-1 ratio. So maybe it's something else. Was I persistent? Yeah, I was really persistent, because you don't keep on having ideas failing and stick with it if you're not somewhat persistent. But I'm actually proud about something else entirely. I'm proud of my optimism. And it's not half-glass full optimism. It is glasses overflowing optimism. I do quite a bit of angel investing, and I will share with you, I'm a terrible angel investor. And there's no excuse. I see enough deals, I can evaluate the team, I can tell whether they're adequately funded, I can look at the technology stack. I have all the tools to see those things, but I've got a fundamental flaw. I'll be sitting there in the meeting, and I'll kind of be shaking my head, and then I can't help myself. All of a sudden, I see an angle, and I grab that whiteboard marker, and I'm up at the whiteboard going, this just might work. I like every idea that I hear. Just not a good formula for an angel investor. So I think before, when I told you that you only needed two things, I wasn't being entirely forthright. Yes, you do need that tolerance for risk, because if you're not willing to take the first step, you'll never start. That if you wait until you've gathered enough information to have the right decision, you're too late. You've got to be willing to start down the path, even if you can't see around the bend. Yes, you do need an idea. And as I said before, ideas count for nothing. No one knows anything, so it's not just one idea. You've got to be good at coming up with hundreds of ideas and have the persistence to keep doing it. But the thing you really need, in my opinion, is you have to have confidence. Because when people come up to you and say, that'll never work, well, most of the time they're going to be right. And what I've learned is that the people who are successful are not the ones who come up with the big idea. They're the ones who have that confidence to say, I am going to figure this out. It may not be the first time. It may not be the second or the third or the fifth or the 10th or the 20th. I am going to figure this out. So I think what I'd like to do to close this afternoon is introduce you to one more person. A gentleman named Nolan Bushnell, perhaps a little more well-known than William Goldman. Nolan Bushnell is considered the father of the video game industry. He was the founder of a company called Atari. But he's actually also founded about 18 other companies. He is an entrepreneur's entrepreneur. But the reason I wanted you to meet Nolan this afternoon is because he said something that's always resonated with me. And what he said was this: everyone who's ever taken a shower has had an idea. But it's the person who gets out of the shower, dries off, and does something about it that makes the difference. So, what I want you all to take away from this afternoon, not just from what I'm saying, but from what you heard this entire day, is that I know that those of you on those teams, you have plenty of challenges still ahead of you. It's incredibly exciting to present this, but I tell you, it is just the beginning. You have years of false summits, of valleys, and you have to keep on going. And those of you who aren't in that cohort of companies, but you have ideas of your own, you have to get out of the shower and do something about it for it to be real. But what I will also say is that if you do have a great idea, and you come running down into the kitchen and tell your spouse, or come running in the office and tell your coworkers, or tell your employees, or you tell your board, and they say, That'll never work. Well, you can always call me because you know I like every idea that I hear. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon, and good luck to all of you, really.
Thank you, Mark. That was brilliant. So I'm not going to keep you for long because there are some drinks waiting outside for all of you. But there are a few thank yous that we just need to finish with. Thank you to our sponsors and our partners for supporting our program. They're up on the board now. Huge thank you to the team for all of the hard work they've put in over the last 6 months. And particular thanks needs to go to our team who have put on this event. So Kate, Trine, Cass, everyone else who's put an enormous amount of effort over the last month, or over the last months to make today a success. So, as I said, I won't keep you, but thank you to everyone. Thank you to all of you for coming. And there are drinks outside, and I hope you have a chance to meet the teams.